Hello and welcome to the Fresh Air Sci-Fi Show. I'm Joe.
And I'm the second kind of people.
Oh, we're back to me being reversed now. I managed to work out the really simple function of flipping the axis on the camera whilst I was having a mix.
Nice one.
But I haven't done it on this one because at the moment, the way my screens are set up is when I look at you, you're over there on that screen, so it makes sense. So, I mean, if I start pointing to you that way and you're over there, I'm just going to get too confused. But maybe I'll just switch our positions so I can point to you that way and you'll be over there. Oh, no, Dave, we've already lost you. We've literally just started the stream and we've already lost you. What's going on? It's not my connection today. Hooray.
Sorry about that. I even rebooted the laptop and everything just to make sure it was fine.
It's one of those things. It happens, doesn't it?
Maybe when I pass my networking course, I can figure it all out.
What the problem is.
Yeah.
We should actually at some point though. I mean, you said your router is in your front room. Maybe at some point we should try doing a stream in there with you plugged in directly and see if that sorts the problem. See if it's actually a Wi-Fi issue or an internet issue is what I'm trying to get at.
It's not a Wi-Fi issue because everything else works fine. But
could be the laptop.
From the end of the month, I'll have a Pi in here. So I might hook up a webcam to it and a microphone, and I can just stream from the Pi.
Hey, awesome. Is this for your next project, your OnlyFans?
Yeah.
Dave sits there with a Raspberry Pi and a Raspberry Pi and spends his time eating it on his OnlyFans. There are actually people that do sit there and pay to watch people eat, and I find that crazy. I mean, shit, if someone would pay to watch me eat, fucking hell.
Nobody would pay to watch me eat. I look like Jabba the Hutt devouring a Dairy Queen.
I need to open the window in here. Hey, Leon, nice to see you. Nice to see you.
Leon.
Nice. Do you know what, Dave? We actually had Dave McDonald join us for the mix. You probably haven't heard from him in ages.
I don't think I know him.
You must do from the days when I suppose you never really got that involved in the debates, but I'm fairly certain he was in a number of the debate groups we were in back in the day. But yeah, it was nice to see him. He said he was pleasantly surprised. He was expecting us to be discussing beliefs and things like that, and I was having a mix.
Well, music is beliefs.
Yeah.
Somehow. They're related.
There were aesthetics, and you believe you like the music, or you believe you don't like the music. So there's beliefs and music involved in that, isn't there?
Spot on.
But yeah, so it was nice to have a new face jump on and see us, and obviously it's great to have you back as well, Leon, and anyone else that's out there, feel free to stop by and say hello. Next week I'm jumping ahead and telling you what we're doing next week because we actually know what we're doing next week for once. How amazing is that?
Yeah, we're planning ahead and everything now. We're great.
It's almost like we know what we're doing, but we really don't. And hello, Outdone, as well. Nice to see you. But yeah, so next week we're planning on doing something a little bit different again. We keep trying new things, and the things that work, we're going to keep doing until enough people complain about them. So next week we are on Tuesday. It's my birthday, so we are not having a normal stream. We're just going to get a bunch of people into the chat room. That's all we're planning on, and I mean actually into our Discord chat as well, so live on here. So the idea is it's just going to be an open chat where people can fucking talk over each other and everything. There's going to be mayhem. The idea is you guys are going to keep me company whilst I get drunk, because I'm in lockdown. I can't actually celebrate outside or anything like that. So I mean, I'm just going to sit indoors and get drunk. I might have a mix, I might not. Depends how it goes. If I do, I'll obviously turn it down enough so that we can enjoy our conversation with each other and all of that. I know, Dave, you might be a little bit late next week because of a tutorial anyway.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's a case of you'll probably be 15, 20, 30 minutes late at
Oh no,
most.
I'm Tuesday is an assignment due, and I've already handed that in.
Oh, banging. All right. In that case, you'll be there with us.
Yeah.
So anyone who is interested, what I'm going to do is, I mean, if you contact me directly, I'll send you a link to our Discord. But if not, when I send out the invite for next Tuesday, I'll include a 10 joining thing. So yes. And LB as well. Hopefully you'll be here next Tuesday as well. Good to see you, dude. And yeah, so anyone who wants to join us next Tuesday can. A couple of the other authors from AiR are going to join us. I know Chesh might join us as well.
Awesome.
So there could be a few people here. As I said, there is no real direction to next Tuesday. The only point of next Tuesday is getting me drunk. So if we can play some drinking games or anything like that, I'm all for it. And we'll have it as an AMA as well. You can ask me anything, and the drunker I get, you should ask me the same question every hour and see if I answer it the same way. And also next Thursday, we're planning on having Opie come and talk to us about naturalism and ontological naturalism versus methodological naturalism. I have a lot of trouble saying that word, but I'm getting there.
It just takes a bit of practice.
Yeah, it does. Fucking complicated words, language. Blimey.
Philosophy sucks.
So yeah, I mean that's our plans for next week. We might also do an afternoon stream next Wednesday. And get this, right? Not only do we have next week planned, but we also have the week after planned as well. That's right. So we're actually going to be discussing why Dave and I are atheists. I mean, we run an atheist site. It's an atheist blog. And generally we don't focus on things like why we're atheists or religion or anything like that. I mean, we're not too interested in that sort of thing. You know, we hold the belief gods don't exist, but for the bulk of it, we don't really care anymore. So Dave and I have quite different stories as to why we're atheists, but we're going to cover off things like that. I've got a massive plan, so I can imagine it's probably going to take us at least 3 episodes to go through this, and we'll continue doing various article readings as well. So speaking of article readings, that's what we plan to do tonight.
That was a very good segue. I'm proud of you.
I'm almost getting the hang of this hosting thing. Maybe I've convinced a couple of people I'm not a complete buffoon. Or maybe being a complete buffoon is what you need to be a good host. Am I a good host yet? Am I buffoonery enough? I don't know. But tonight...
That's why you got me on. Double buffoonery.
Not to mention LB in the chat. So... tonight we are covering off an article reading, and this is one of the things that we are doing from time to time. So Answers in Reason, we used to release probably 2 to 3 articles a week, plus a podcast, plus this. Since we've been doing the live streams, we've probably taken the foot off the gas with doing our articles as much as we did before. But occasionally I get inspired to do something. And I've had a couple recently, but there's also older articles that would be worth covering off. Dave's also got a couple of articles in the works. I know your coursework has sort of taken your attention away. But the idea is we're going to discuss them. The way I treat doing the articles and discussing them with you and with Dave and people like that is it's sort of a peer review. So I appreciate any sort of critique people might have in regards to the articles that we do. There are times when I change what I write because of what people say. There are times when I further explain my point. There are times when I go, well, you don't fucking know what you're talking about, because it does happen sometimes. I mean, I wrote one that I released yesterday, and a couple of bits of feedback came back and straight away, and I was like, right, yeah, I need to tighten up this part of the explanation, and there you go. And it makes a better article, and that is my end goal. I want to write something that makes sense and you guys fully understand and enjoy reading. I think one of the things that we do with these streams and with the articles that we write is we want you to enjoy it. We want you to be entertained by the things that we say and present to you. But I also get that isn't necessarily always going to be doable. Some of the topics we discuss are a little bit dry, aren't they, Dave? Oh, we've lost you again. Or are you just holding really still and you just... I reckon Dave one day is going to start playing tricks on me, and he's just going to stay as still as he can until I start insulting him and go, yeah, fuck you, Joe. But yeah. So just going to read the chat for a second whilst Dave sorts out whatever's going on with his connection. For a second, you thought meant Graham Oppie. No, I would love it if Oppie would come on. I haven't even approached him, although I was really surprised when Ozzy joined us on the stream. You know, he's such a nice guy, such an absolutely lovely guy. And did not expect him to join us. He was in a group and he responded to something I said, and I said, "Why don't you come on stream and discuss it with us?" And he was just up for it. And I'm really grateful to have that conversation with him, because I'd seen a couple of his videos before, but having that live conversation with him was amazing. And I'm happy to ask him if he wants to come on again if we've got a topic that I think that would be beneficial to have him on. As for Oppie, I mean, we're probably too small for him to even look at us, aren't we? Who knows? But yes, that would be great as well. But as I was saying, tonight we're having an article reading, and we're going to have a few discussions around the article. Any questions that come in from you guys, of course, we're doing. I'm just going to switch to a screen that, whilst I set up things so that we can stream properly. And yes, be right back.
What am I going to do today, man? Oh, give a bite of cool. You guys had some great ideas.
Weirdly, when it disconnected me that time, it kept playing YouTube for about a minute and a half.
Hey, yo, Bud, what's up, man?
Yeah, man, what you saying, bro?
Yeah, how's it going, bro? How you feeling?
Lean.
Safe, me too, man, me too. I'm so bored out of my mind, though. We gotta hook up. Wait, what happened to you yesterday, man? I thought you were coming round.
I didn't do nothing, man. But you wanna know what I done yesterday? I'll rap that shit to you right now. You know, I open my eyes and what do I see? It's a big Jimmy Bifter staring back at me. I put it to my lips and the taste is sweet. And I heard my brothers rocking out to this beat. I closed my eyes, then rose from my seat. And I had to venture forth to find some lunch to eat. And I stopped off in there.
Telling Joe.
Right, full screen. There we go. Everything's looking about right. Just go F11 that, shall we? There you go. It's a little bit neater for you. Right, so is everything working on the stream? Let me just quickly go back to the stream and check.
Just had a look, and yeah,
it's all working.
Playing that phone call song.
Is it? Yeah. That song, it should have switched back by now and stopped playing that song, but that track was something I wrote about a friend, and then I got him to rap, and it's kind of a bit of a dig at his life, but at the same time celebrating how crap and boring our lives are at the same time. But yeah, I do plan on having like trying to work out how to have a playlist of random stuff I can put on there, but obviously it's got to be stuff that isn't copyrighted. So one of the things that like one of the reasons I split the streams and I cut out the music section and the actual live stream when we go live is because that music is copyrighted, and whilst I do have the right to play it because I've bought it and all of that, unless I have the entertainment license, the royalties need to be paid by them, which goes through advertising and all of that sort of stuff. And so there's going to be ads on the mixes, whereas I try and keep things as clean as possible for everything that we're doing. And so hopefully there'll be no ads showing or anything like that. So this article is called "You Won't Believe This." And you might not believe this, but I couldn't think of a better name. Oh, we've lost Dave again. Oh, and he's back.
Hello.
So "You Won't Believe This" is an article that is to do with propositional logic and beliefs. Dave, one thing, can you keep an eye on the chat for me as well whilst I do this? I generally keep an eye on any comments that come in. As you read and you see me reading off screen, feel free to interrupt me for any questions or comments that come in. We do know that YouTube tends to be 10 to 20 seconds lag behind everything, which is odd because Twitch seems to be pretty much instantaneous. I don't know why there is that lag. Basically, everything goes to restream and then gets pumped out to all the different places that we stream to. But yeah, there seems to be a bit of a lag to YouTube. Maybe it's just because of how many people actually use it. So as I said, feel free to interrupt me at any point. Hopefully you can read this, but you don't need to worry because I'm going to read it out to you anyway. So, "You won't believe this." CMT stands for Conflated and Misunderstood Terms. It's part of an article series. It's the 12th in the series that is basically to help with people's understanding of various terms. Language is one of those complex beasts, and people can sometimes get things contextually wrong. So if we think about contextually wrong, there is a specific definition for theory when discussing science. So simply saying it's just an idea would be contextually wrong, but theory as an idea is one of those things that is actually correct. Anyway, let's move on with the article. "You Won't Believe This," CMT Volume 12. "I've been trying to think of another way to explain beliefs, as I still hear folks saying they are absent of belief in regards to X, or they have no beliefs. Whilst I'm sure they believe what they're saying, it makes me feel I've failed in my explanations. Rather than spray out all the propositional logic or the different definitions of belief, I started thinking about how something like this might be represented in a database, just for understanding there, I program databases. Perhaps with binary, and then I adapted my thoughts to make a calculation that's a little bit more easy to read for the average end user. I then thought about how we could represent a proposition as a football or soccer pitch, and those involved in the game are the players somewhere on the pitch. So when we consider a proposition in its clearest form, it's binary. It's true or false. It's represented by a 1, true, or the logical notation for this would be P, and 0, or false, and the logical notation for this would be not P. So what I mean there is the actual proposition itself, not people's attitudes towards it, just the actual proposition. So the binary representation on a proposition. If we are to examine most things, they can be split into these binary propositions. They might require further explanation after the fact, but the core message is there. For example, the light switch is on. It's one of the simplest examples of a logic gate. It only has an on or an off position. It is 1 or 0. I mean, think about your remote control for a moment on your TV. You've got that circle and you've got that 1 in the middle of it. That is saying 0 is off and 1 is on. That's what that bit actually means. So it's the same as the light switch on and off. Even if you were to throw a spanner in the works and saying it's a dimmer switch, it is still on or off. It's just got various brightening settings once it's on. So again, it can be represented like this. 1, the light switch is on. 0, the light switch is off. It is raining outside is another proposition. When discussing a type of weather, for example, it is raining, this will be a yes, no, true, false. But it will only tell us about that particular weather, not all other weather types. So for again, 1, it is raining outside, or 0, it is not raining outside. Another proposition, at least one entity that could be described as a God exists, or for the sake of ease, we'll be discussing God exists. In short, when discussing the proposition of God exists, we are more speaking of any entity that could be described with godly-like abilities. More often than not, though, you'll be discussing it on the platform of the omni-God from the Abrahamic religions. But however you are discussing gods in general, that is, the result is the same. Either something exists, or it does not exist. For the sake of the conversation, we will include everything that has an existence as something that exists. For example, if you think God died creating the universe, then we would include it as something like a God exists. So again, 1, God exists, so that means God exists is true. 0, God does not exist. Everyone with me so far? Any questions at this point? Am I making sense, Dave? Oh, we've lost you, Dave. I don't know if we're making sense, Dave, because you're not there. Oh, you're back again.
I'm back.
Well, hopefully I'm making sense, but I don't have anyone to tell me if I am or not.
You're making sense.
Excellent. So, a binary representation on belief. You either believe something or you don't is a common line that we actually hear, and it isn't wrong, but it's misused slightly. So that said, we'll start there. Sorry, Dave, what were you going to say?
I was just going to say it's not the whole picture.
Exactly. It gives you your foundation, but...
Yeah, discussing it in those terms is discussing it solely in terms of whether a particular mental state exists, rather than your actual belief about the topic.
Exactly. So, as Dave was saying, you're describing a mental state about a particular thing. 1, you believe it. 0, you don't believe it. And it's not the whole picture, which we'll describe next. So, when we look at binary propositions and beliefs together, we now understand how a proposition is binary and how a belief can be described as binary in the sense that you do or don't hold that belief. We now have to consider how the two work together. When discussing a proposition, we are trying to look for a complete answer in relation to it. It is often seen that we only hear half an answer and folks don't realise that it's actually half an answer. So, half or whole. Now that we understand the proposition is binary, a 1-0 true-false type deal, we can consider how we answer it better. The idea is to answer both parts of the proposition, not just what you think about half of it. So what I mean by that is, you might think, aka believe, it is not true, but does that mean you think it is false? The lack of clarity can cause confusion about what your position on the proposition actually is, and requires further investigation. This is why we answer the whole proposition rather than just giving a read of the psychological state. So when it comes to answering a proposition, what we are expecting is an answer on your attitude towards both if it is true and if it is false. This isn't a knowledge claim. It's not said with absolute certainty, necessarily, I suppose it could be. Just the direction you are leaning towards. So below is a small chart in relation to a generic proposition and our attitude or possibilities towards it, once having been presented it. Now, I put once having been presented it or being aware of it in there because it's very relevant to the conversation and it's going to be covered in a section later on. So we can see here this, really, really basic table. Okay, so you've got your proposition, so P, and it's either 1 or 0. It's either true or false. You then have your belief position here. We've got 4 belief states that we're going to discuss in relation to it. So we've got A, 1, 0, B, 0, 1, C, 0, 0, D, 1, 1. So remember, 1 is when you have belief. Okay? So in regards to A, you believe the proposition is true, which you can see here, 1 and 1. So the proposition is true, you believe it's true. And you also do not believe the proposition is false. So in the sense of 0, you've got 0. So 1, 0, 1, 0. Quite easy. It's a standard belief towards a proposition, and it can be represented with logical notation such as BP, belief in the proposition. And obviously, as I mentioned before, not belief in not P. So this is this bit here, the 0. You don't believe in not P. For the summary below, this is quite a bit on, this is a positive belief in the proposition. So we're going to give this a score of 1. If we're to think of this in terms of a football or soccer team, we could think of their position on the field as forwards. For B, you believe the position is not true, see 0, 1, and you believe the proposition is false. You've got belief in the position being false. This is the standard disbelief in a proposition, and it can be represented with logical notations such as B not P, and the not B P naturally follows. For the summary below, as this is a disbelief in the proposition or a belief in the negative, we can give this a value of -1. If we were to think of it in the terms of football, we could think of their position on the field as defence. So in regards to C, they don't believe the proposition is true, and they don't believe the proposition is false. This position is known as suspending judgment, withholding belief, or the psychological state of being agnostic. For the summary below, as this is neither belief nor disbelief, it makes sense that it sits in the middle of the 2 values we gave before, so we're going to give it a value of 0. And if we're going to think it about a football team, their position is the midfield. Now lastly, we have this one, D, where they believe the proposition is true and they believe the proposition is false. Now this is known as holding 2 contradictory beliefs. It's irrational and impossible. And what I mean by impossible, it's not impossible to hold contradictory beliefs. It's impossible that something is both true and not true at the same time. And just for clarification there, I may even edit the article to put that in. Something cannot be both true and false. Unlike the above, where you're suspending judgment as you're not convinced, this is one where you've been convinced something illogical is true, and therefore you're holding an irrational belief state. The 3 above are rational belief states that can further be justified as being rational positions to hold. This is just irrational from the outset, right? It should be excluded from the summary, but for the sake of the conversation, we're going to call it the square root of -1. And if we're to think of it in terms of football, we could think of their position on the field as a streaker wasted on acid doing the helicopter with their penis. So, are there other answers? Well, of course there are other answers to the proposition, though they do not necessarily give a full answer to the proposition. Most of these would still fit in that 0 position of not having a belief either way, but with different reasoning, like finding the proposition meaningless or just not caring enough to consider it. They haven't considered the proposition and are actively suspending judgment in it. So even though they do lack belief both ways, they haven't fully considered it. So they aren't really answering it. So if we're to think of it in terms of football or soccer, we could think of their position on the field as folks watching from the sideline. Absence of belief. So absence of belief is an interesting one that I feel is often misused. I explained in detail the difference between not believing something and being absent of belief in belief, don't believe, lack of belief, and absent of belief in the previous chapter of CMT. But in short, if you're truly absent of belief, it means you have no mental state in relation to the proposition. However, the second you hear any form of proposition in your mind, you start to build beliefs around it. What happens is when people say they're absent of belief, in general, what they mean is they don't hold the belief. For example, if we're going to go with God exists, they go, I'm absent in belief in that. All they mean is they don't believe God exists. They're not saying they're actually completely absent of a mental state in regards to it. It's why it's a bit of a confusing term, I find. So right now, I could have some propositions in my head, and you are completely unaware of them. You're actually absent of belief in regards to them. However, the second I mention them, you will fill your head with thoughts about them and form beliefs of some description. You may, arguably say, well, I'm absent of belief that that is true. But again, I'm talking about the whole mental state in regards to the proposition. Once you've heard a proposition, you will have these answers. So, for example, my name is Joe. My mum caught COVID. I just did a kickflip. I once made a rolling paper levitate with the power of my mind. I have a pet baby elephant. These are, of course, not all true. Some of them are. You will, however, have started to form a belief about each and every one. You might even believe ones that are not true, or disbelieve or suspend judgment over the ones that are true. Again, like I mentioned, there are other answers. You might not care either way and not consider it. Don't care. The problem is people are using absence of belief to describe that they don't believe the proposition is true, which technically they are absent of that belief, but having considered the proposition, they are not completely absent of belief in regards to it in its entirety. Generally, this is done because they think it absolves them of their epistemic responsibility. Either they don't understand epistemic responsibility, or they are lying. Another option there, I suppose, is they don't understand beliefs, or mental states, or anything like that. Anyway, as described previously, to be truly absent of belief in regards to a proposition, you have to either be ignorant of it or unable to understand or process it, like a baby or someone with brain damage. Considering some of the people who do say they're absent of belief, maybe brain damage is the answer. For the summary that we'll get to towards the end, with this belief position being completely absent of a mental state, we will use the value null. Now, if you understand databases, you'll understand that null and zero are two different things. That's why I use these values. But I suppose if you don't, you don't. But again, nothing and zero are two different things. So again, if we're to think about this in terms of a football or soccer game, we would think of their position on the field as someone not even at the game and completely unaware that a game is even being played. So a summary of the positions. I've got two types of summary, as I mentioned. One based on the numerics above, and the other the game of football or soccer. So the numerical summary, it's a very simplistic look at the positions and the logical notation in relation to that position. So I mentioned before, one is that belief in the proposition. So the standard notation, obviously you believe the proposition, which obviously entails that you don't believe the proposition is false. Zero was that middle ground, your suspense of judgment. So this is not believing the proposition is false and not believing the proposition is true. Negative one is that disbelief. So that's believing the proposition is not true and lacking belief in the proposition. Null is that absent of belief. I've put, there's no real logical notation for it there. for ease. We could describe it with logical notation, but it probably complicate the matter a little bit. And then we've got the square root of -1, which is where you're holding contradictory beliefs and you're believing it is both true and false, which is ridiculous. So if we're going to apply that to the proposition God exists, we do have names for these positions. Now, I know that some of these words are defined differently on the internet. I'm not really debating them there. I'm just explaining how the logic works in regards to these names. You can use whatever identifier you want for yourself. But in the instance of holding the belief that God exists, you're a theist. In relation to being in suspense of judgment, you're agnostic. This could be one of those things known as weak agnosticism. In regards to the position of disbelief in God's exist, you're an atheist. If you're completely absent of belief, for example, a baby or someone who has never heard of gods, you're an innocent. And contradictory beliefs, well, I've left that as no particular identifier because there could be a bunch of different identifiers. So, as I put here, these might not be how contemporary internet atheists describe them. Just to clarify, I am an atheist myself, and that is how I do describe them, but that's not how everybody describes them. So, I did mention other positions, and I speak about them more in Ontology and the Things That We Lack. Now, the football summary, this is to give it more of a visual aid to the real-world comparison of things. So we've got our forwards, they're the belief, so they're up there. We've got the midfield, who have the old suspense of judgment. The defence are disbelief. I know there's no goalie, leave that off for now. People who are not in attendance, they're absent of belief. They're not on the field at all. The streaker is someone that is holding those contradictory beliefs. And the supporters are other lack of belief positions, right? So the field is the proposition, and these are different positions they are taking in regards to it. That's why I'm trying to give you this visual aid when you're thinking about a proposition. Which I say there. So those on the sidelines are those that have heard the proposition but not really thought it fully through, perhaps because they find it meaningless or do not care. Those not on the field at all are those that have not heard the proposition or cannot process it, be that either due to age, babies, the lack of the cognitive and language abilities to consider propositions and hold beliefs in relation to them, or due to someone having brain damage, or perhaps because it's an inanimate object that is unable to hold brain states at all. So when someone tells me they are absent of belief or describes atheism as an absence of belief in gods, I have to sit there and think, how? Being charitable, it's likely they don't actually mean absent of belief. They mean they don't believe in the proposition or God's existence. This doesn't really tell us their position on the field, though, does it? All we know is that they will be sitting somewhere in any of these positions apart from the forwards. They could even be, well, no, they wouldn't be the streaker or the forwards. They'd be anyone but. So hopefully this article has helped.
Be the drunken idiot by the side.
Yeah, yeah. See, I wish that was my position. It sounds far more fun. So hopefully this article is explained.
I'm sorry, interrupting you.
No, perfect. I wish you'd do it more. It's fine to use other definitions of atheism if you prefer them, or you find you have more utility in your discussion. But what I'm focused on here is the belief states and helping people be clear in their positions, right? So regardless of what you call atheism and agnosticism and non-theism and theism and any of that, I'm not really debating that bit right now. I did use them to describe how they would be described through propositional logic. But what I'm trying to do is this image down here of rational belief, which is belief, disbelief, and suspension of judgment, right? there are 3 cognitive or epistemic attitudes one can take towards a proposition. It's talking of rational positions. I mentioned 4 earlier in that table, the 4th one being holding contradictory beliefs. And overall, I mentioned a 5th one where someone's completely absent of belief, but that's because they're not aware of it. But if you're actually answering a proposition, there are 3 cognitive or epistemic attitudes that answer the proposition. Belief: you conclude that a proposition is true, then the appropriate attitude towards that proposition is belief. Disbelief: if you conclude that a proposition is false, then the appropriate attitude towards that proposition is disbelief. Suspension of judgment: if you are unable to reach a conclusion concerning the truth value of P, then the appropriate attitude towards P is suspension of judgment. Now, beliefs can come in a variety of degrees, and by that we're talking about the strength of your belief, the amount of certainty that you might have for your belief. You might only be like, well, I lean this way, but I'm only 5% sure. Or you could be 100% psychologically certain. That's still not a knowledge claim, because you don't necessarily have epistemic certainty. But there you go. And at the end of this article's ton of related articles that I put in relation to it. As I said, I mean, if you want to read this in your own time, it's on answersinreason.com. I mean, if you search Answers in Reason on the internet, it should be one of the first ones that comes up. If it doesn't, I blame Trump. But yes, it's called You Won't Believe This. It should be on the front. Should we see what's on the front page, actually? Just quickly, just to clarify how far down right now it is. Oh, I'm clicking on the wrong page, aren't I? I'm clicking on the stream. So on the front page, we've got that analysis of Caffeine Corner that I posted yesterday, Free Will and Determinism. Now, this is an article that I would quite like to cover off, but I reckon that we'd need a few streams to cover this one off. We've also got You Won't Believe This. So there you go. So right now it's 1, 2, 3, the 4th article on the site if you go to the homepage of answersinreason.com. Let me just quickly switch everything back to the way it was, and we shall see where we go from here.
What am I gonna do today, man? Oh, give a bicycle. He always has some great ideas what to do. Hey, yo, what's...
Right, so we're back. Apologies for the brief delay there. So let's have a catch up with the chat room. I know Dave's been keeping you whilst we do that. So there's a number of things that have come in from the chat. Oh, blimey, there's lots of chat. I don't know how I'm supposed to catch up with all of this in such a short space of time. Essentially, right. Okay. Oh, hey, OP. Nice to see you in there. Nice to see you all. Yeah. So does everybody finding that it's making sense? It seems like everybody is. Yeah, I do think you're just being nice, Dave. You've been very nice recently. I'm not used to it.
How dare you call me nice?
Leon, yeah, well played. I just lack belief. Dave is being honest. Very good. So, as LB says, this is what many internet atheists do not understand when you engage with theists in terms of philosophy. You have an epistemic duty as an atheist to make your case. So, I mean, what we're getting into that bit is your justification. Even if you are of that suspense of judgment, you know, where you're saying, well, I don't believe that, but I don't believe that. I don't believe either way. I don't believe gods don't exist, but I don't believe gods exist. You still have to justify your belief. And in fact, Steve McRae has a article on the burden of proof for an agnostic. He's an agnostic himself. So it's worth checking that one out if you want to know someone who, if you describe yourself as an agnostic or an agnostic atheist, that describes what your burden of proof actually is. If you're interested in what the burden of proof for an atheist is, I've written an article on Answers in Reason called "Do We Atheists Have a Burden of Proof?" I mean, the answer to that is yes, but I also go into describing, in short, how I justify my burden of proof. Yeah, Leon, you make a good point. Most atheists believe that justification is only achieved through empiricism. I mean, that's a bit silly, isn't it, Dave?
Yeah, it is.
There are plenty of different ways you can justify your position. Now, it's a bit different to if you're saying this definitely is the case. You know, I am definitely holding a glass right now. I mean, you've got a visual aid there, and I can understand that me making a positive claim like this, it requires a bit more rigor to it than me saying, well, I believe that I've got a glass on the table, but I'm not exactly sure because I don't know what I've done with it and I can't see it right now. It's a bit more, a belief isn't as certain as something where you're asserting it is true. But yes. Yeah, Dave, you point out that especially if they want to go around calling themselves rational or skeptics, it's yeah. Yeah. LB says it goes back to what, as he said, why hide the ball? That is a good way of putting it, though, isn't it? Like, I'd completely forgotten he'd said that, but that's almost akin to what I'm talking about with the football field being the proposition. He's talking about the ball being the proposition, and he's saying that people are hiding the ball. So you've got everybody on the field waiting to play a game, and there's a bunch of people who hide the ball. They're the ones that are claiming they are absent of belief, you know, but they're not actually that. So because they think that absolves them of their epistemic responsibility. Some atheists try to conflate agnostics, non-theists, non-cogs, etc. They do. It's a valid use. Non-theists, all non-theists are atheists. It's a valid use. It's not very clear. And I think that's the problem. When I'm talking about the belief states and the various ontological positions as well, when we go into that bit, if you're just regarding anyone that's not a theist as an atheist, it's not really clear what their position is. You don't really know what they are saying or doing, etc. So there you go. Just to be sure, does disbelief simply mean you don't believe the proposition, or does it also mean that you believe it is false? Okay, so Leon, your question there, it technically means both because it is used in both ways. But when you're discussing logic, right, and when you're answering a proposition, disbelieve means you believe it is false. You don't simply lack belief in the proposition, you are asserting that the proposition is false. However, the way language works, people use disbelieve as a descriptor for a psychological state where they're saying they literally just lack belief. And then they go on further and say, well, lack can mean without, and without means absent, therefore I'm absent of belief. I did an article called Synonyms, spelled S-I-N, because it's the sinful use of synonyms. It's taking words from their most concise state and going through the motions to get to a point where actually you've used disbelief to be absent of belief. And that's not the same thing. That's not, especially when you're discussing a proposition, that's not how it ought to be used. But language is fluid, so you can use it that way. Yeah, as you say, Dave, one of your major complaints about the lacktheist attitude. Yeah, sorry, I am just trying to read and say this at the same time, whereas not leaving you with any dead air at the same time. Oh, Dave, you did address colloquially disbelief can mean not believe, but in philosophy it's to disaffirm the proposition. So, I mean, Dave said that in a much cleverer way than me, but that's because he's cleverer than me. So there you go.
Ever. I was clever as a slug sliding on the kitchen door.
Dude, I mean, where does everyone put everyone else? They're just the slime traveling behind you.
Oh, I don't like to say anything.
Yeah, I like what you say as well, Dave. The new atheist movement marketed themselves really well. They think atheist speaks of how rational and logical they are. That is one of the things that you do see some claims that some people go, well, yeah, because I'm atheist, it means I'm rational and logical. There is a lot of ego tied into the label, and it's why some people, not all of them, but why some people use that label even though they wouldn't normatively be described as an atheist. And they think, what's up? Sorry.
I was just going to say, think of that discussion the other night with that David Smalley.
Oh, yes.
Where he said, oh, but that puts them on the same level as me if
you use the same sort of terms as them. So,
and
sorry, we lost you there briefly, Dave, so I carried on for you.
That's right. Thank you. Yeah, he was worried that he would be seen at the same level of rationality as the theist. And
Yeah.
I think that sort of goes towards proving that for a lot of them, atheism says more than just, I don't believe in gods. It says, I'm rational, I'm logical, I'm skeptical, I'm this, I'm that.
It does. I mean, a lot of atheists simply think that a belief is something that you accept without evidence, and therefore all beliefs are irrational. And they have a very narrow field of what evidence is. A lot of things I'll go, that's not evidence, when they are. Rationality isn't whether you hold a belief or not, it's why you hold your belief, or why you don't hold a belief, why you suspend judgment, why you think the proposition is meaningless. You know, I think that it's quite easy to be a rational agnostic or a rational atheist, for example. Both of those positions can be rationalized. I think even theists can be as rational as they can be. I think in general, most theists are quite rational. I think some of them have very bad arguments for their God, though. The reason they believe in God is some of them, obviously not all, because some of them have got very well thought out positions, but some of them believe in God simply because, well, it's how I was brought up. My dad believes, so I do. And that isn't very rational thinking. And you could say the same for an atheist. Well, we've never believed in God, so I don't. I've never really thought about it. That's technically an irrational reason to actually not believe. You know, especially if you go so far as to believe gods don't exist. Well, I believe gods don't exist. Why? Well, because I've just never believed.
My parents did.
Yeah, and I've said before, I think, for example, a YEC, even though their position is an irrational one, can be rational in their YEC belief if they are in, say, sort of a commune where that's all the knowledge they've ever been given about a young earth and their biblical teachings. You know, the second they go out into the world and they learn a bit of science and a dose of reality and they reject it, okay, they're suddenly now in an irrational position because they've got more information available to them. But if the only information they have is from this small commune and about the world, then of course it's as rational as they can be. Here's all the information you're allowed. Okay, well, I formed my beliefs on this because of this. And yes, it does get circular, but it doesn't mean it's irrational. It means it's as rational as it can be. And that's one of the hardest things with rationality, because not only do we have what is and isn't rational, we also have how rational a particular person can be at a particular time in their life and the particular surroundings and everything like that. So rationality is bloody confusing. It's one of the shows that I think I'd like to cover off again. We did a podcast, I think it was in our first season of Fresh Air, and I'd like to get deeper into the rationality debate at some point. We've been breaking out into different topics recently. Yeah, I reckon it will. I think I have a little bit of a better understanding than I did when we first discussed rationality, and we can talk at the next level, and you can blow me away, Dave, and I'll go, oh, fuck, I really don't understand as much as I thought again.
You understand the basics. That's good enough.
The crazy thing is, I don't think most people even do understand the basics of rationality.
I don't think a lot of people, I think the same. I don't think a lot of people who use terms like I'm rational actually know what they're saying when they say I'm rational.
Yeah.
Like, what was his name? Chris Mann, when I said define rationality. And he went, well, it's being rational. Okay, but to be rational, well, I'm using the term to mean the same thing that everybody else means when they say rational. Okay, but what does that mean? Well, it's colloquial. He could never actually tell me what being rational was.
Yeah, he used the same thing when he was talking about logical as well. I remember him talking about something logical. Well, what's logical? Well, I'm using logical debate. But what is logical debate? Well, it's debating logically. Okay, but what is logic? Well, it's a thing I'm using. Okay, yeah. But what is that?
I mean the same thing that everybody else means when they say being logical. What does that mean?
And that's why Dave came up with the "oh man" fallacy.
Yeah, he's also one of the reasons why I stopped actually having discussions with most people, because it gets so circular and painful.
Yeah, no, I understand that.
Tell me I don't know what I'm talking about, and it's like, okay,
it's frustrating, that one, isn't it? I mean, that is the Dunning-Kruger in full effect. People who don't know much about a topic but assume that they do, assuming you don't know what you're talking about. And the problem is, I mean, especially someone like Dave, who's got a lot of knowledge and experience with these particular topics, because he knows how much he might not know, will be less confident than someone who is going on about, yeah, well, I know everything. And, okay, with someone like Chris Mann, it was completely obvious how clueless he was. But other people who might have a little bit more knowledge than him, but still not be over that edge of the Dunning-Kruger and going, oh, fuck, there's so much more I don't know. It can make you doubt yourself. You end up in that whole imposter syndrome category where you're like, maybe I need to go and research this again. Maybe I've misquoted someone. Maybe what I learned last year was absolutely wrong and I've completely misinterpreted it. And it doesn't matter that Dave sat there with a distinction on his master's degree and most of his coursework, 80-90% and stuff like that. That doesn't actually matter at that point in time, because you're suddenly like, shit, maybe I did miss it wrong. So I understand, like, conversations with folks like him, they dissuade you from having those conversations. Yeah. So LB says, another thing, isn't burden of justification more for yourself than trying to persuade someone? Okay, so that's a good question. You should always be able to justify your belief to yourself. But in a conversation, you should also be able to justify it to someone else. You don't have to. But if we were having a conversation and I was going to go, well, Dave, frankly, I believe gods don't exist. And he was to go, why? And I go, well, I don't want to discuss that with you. I don't have to, but it doesn't show Dave that I've got a rational position.
No.
So you're right. It's not necessarily to convince Dave that gods don't exist, but it is to show him that I've thought out my position well enough and I hold a rational position. From there, Dave might go, yeah, but what about? And we might have something to talk about. Or Dave might go, oh, crap, I hadn't thought of that. Maybe I need to think about this. Well, Joe, what do you think about this thing? Because I justify it this way. And I might turn around and go, oh, crap, I haven't thought about that either. I need to learn more. Or I might go, well, Dave, that's quite obvious with that one. Think about X, Y, Z. And you go, shit, I'm no longer justified in this belief because I thought this because of this, but you've shown a hole in this. Right. And that's part of justification as well, especially if you're having a dialectic conversation. Your justification is to yourself, but it's also to the conversation to find the truth in the conversation. And by the end of it, you might find that both of you are in a less rational position than you first thought, and you need to research your position on that topic more, at least if you care to. And maybe that's some of the reason why people don't spend the time either.
Yeah. I think that's why a lot of Plato's dialogues end that way, just to show you that it can happen, and you should then both go off and have a look and have a think.
And there's nothing wrong with that, is there, really? No. Actually, I don't know where we're at. We need to research more.
Yeah, we'll come back and have the dialogue in a week or two.
Brilliant.
One of the things as well is you should also remember when it comes to justifying your position to other people is that there are people who you may never be able to justify your position to. Think of somebody like that, David Smalley, or somebody like the Duke, where you're saying, well, no, my position on atheism is this. If they're so entrenched
in their position, we need to sort out your connection. If they're so entrenched in their position is where you were at, Dave.
They might be that entrenched in their position that they will only accept you accepting theirs.
Yeah.
For them, rationality is judged by whether or not you agree with them. So there will be people you can never justify your position to.
Yeah.
Regardless. Yeah.
Or at least they will never accept your justification.
Yeah.
Because only their position, in their eyes, is rational. And if you don't agree with them, you're irrational in their eyes. So, I mean, that's sort of going down the lines of subjective versus objective rationality. And, God.
Well, I mean, if you think about the average person, they'll judge how smart a person is by how much they agree with them.
Fair. I don't do it that way. I do it sort of by how much more they seem to know than me, and how quick they are at picking things up, and how quick they can adjust to the changes in my conversation. And if they can pick up things quickly, or even if they ask the right questions at the right time, if they don't necessarily understand something, but they ask the questions that get them to the knowledge, and I go, blimey, you understood that quicker. It took me a couple of weeks to get there, and you've asked me the right questions to get to that same point of knowledge where you now understand this. Bastard, why don't I have your mind?
Yeah, same. But there is a lot of people who, if you think about the people who talk about ethics and you say, well, no, there's more to ethics than that. It's like, no, it's subjective. You don't know what you're talking about if you say it's more than subjective.
Yeah. God, I hate those conversations.
Yeah.
I really love conversations about ethics and morality and various ethical theories and things like that. But I really hate getting involved in a conversation with a subjectivist that really only knows a very vague outline of moral subjectivism.
Yeah. And they go on to judge how much you know based on how little they know.
Yeah.
Not, you seem to have all this bigger understanding. It's, oh no, you're just wrong. You haven't got the same opinion as me, so therefore you're wrong. And you've got to remember when you're justifying your position to people that happens a lot, unfortunately.
Yeah, it's frustrating. So we've got a load more in the chat to cover off as well. This is really nice. No, I love it. I'm just trying to bring it back. Just trying to catch up on it as well. So LB says another thing is that while that is valid, it's not sound to conflate all the agnostics on this because they don't equate. Yes. So I mean, this is something valid versus sound. So I mean, one I like to bring up when we talk about valid versus sound is the Kalam. I think it's a valid argument, but it's not necessarily sound. It could be if we had more knowledge and actually we realized it was. But but there are a few things with our current understanding can poke holes in some of the premises, and therefore it's not sound. And some people go, well, because it's not sound, it's not valid. And that's not how it works. Okay. Now, language is a little bit more confusing because it's not a syllogism or anything like that. Every definition is technically valid, but there are more logical, concise, specific definitions for words, which is why using the specific ontological positions as descriptors allows us to infer what someone does and does not believe about a proposition. If all atheists are people that just lack belief in gods, we don't really know what they do and don't believe about gods, right? When we talk about an atheist, there's someone that they haven't even given an answer to the proposition. They don't think the proposition is meaningful. They think gods are so ill-defined and incoherent that they're not worth considering the proposition, right? An apatheist doesn't give a shit either way. I don't care if gods exist, so therefore, fuck it. You know, you can use that attitudinally. I mean, with atheism, I actually use that as part of my justification for why I believe gods don't exist, right? But I have given an answer to the proposition where they're just not even considering the proposition because they find it ill-defined. And that's why having these concise, specific positions is more sound. It's still valid to call them all atheists. It's still valid to call them all turnips. You know, whatever you want. That's how language works. But there are more sound usages.
Well, before we go on to the next one thing with that is you'll find a lot of atheists say, you don't get to tell me what atheism is. You don't get to define me. Atheists get to define themselves. But they never extend that to the idea of the agnostic or the agnostic or anyone like that. They'll say, no, you must accept that you're an atheist. It's a very imbalanced kind of position that they hold.
No, that's definitely true. I mean, a couple of people that come to mind is Duke, and also like that conversation with David Smalley that Steve was having the other day. They at least now, both of them acknowledge that there are other definitions, but they will still hold other people to their definition. And that is the bit that is confusing. I mean, it's like, if I was to say, I think using the term agnostic atheist is nonsensical, superfluous, or at the very least ambiguous, but call yourself what you want, they'll turn around and say, no, you are this particular position. They will talk about, say, for example, Steve, who identifies as an agnostic, and say, well, all agnostics are atheists, so you're an agnostic atheist. And he'll go, well, no, I identify as an agnostic. You can call yourself an agnostic atheist if you want. I think that terminology is bullshit, but, you know, call yourself what you want. And they get on the defensive about that sort of thing as well. And I think that's the thing that I find ridiculous with the whole position. Atheists can define atheism, and they define atheism as anyone that's not a theist. At least the internet atheists do. I mean, I'm an atheist as well on the internet, so technically I'm an internet atheist, but we're talking about a specific kind of internet atheist. And as an atheist on the internet, I will turn around and go, well, no, I mean, he describes himself as an agnostic, and this is how it's normally described in philosophy, as someone that's suspending judgment. So he's an agnostic. And they'll go, no, he's not. He's an agnostic atheist. And you're an anti-theist because you hold the belief gods don't exist. And so, well, you said atheists can define atheism, and I'm an atheist and I'm defining atheism, but I'm not allowed to do it because it's not the same as your definition of atheism, even though you're normatively described as an agnostic, and I'm allowing you to use whatever descriptor you want, but you're forcing your description onto other people, but saying that you're allowed to define things how you want. I mean, is this not special pleading as well?
I'm sorry for my internet connection tonight. I really don't know what the hell's going on.
Yeah, I mean, it's been a week, Dave, surely. You can hold out for a night.
I know.
So still catching up a little bit. We're nearly caught up. Leon says synonym. You love that term. Yes, so do I. That's why I made it up. LB, especially when it comes to internet atheists who do debating. Inspiring Philosophy versus Matt Dillahunty is a perfect example of this. Matt kept dodging and refusing. I mean, yeah, I have to say he does do a lot of, as in Matt, does do a lot of dodging and refusing. And I mean, I listen to occasionally a suggested video comes up on YouTube. Generally, I skip Atheist Experience stuff, but sometimes I tune in. There were times when I was younger where I found some of the videos entertaining and some of the points made were pretty good. But it's become more and more of a shit show, and it's become more and more heuristic, and it's been, what, you're not listening to me? Hang up. And people will ask him a question and he'll answer a different one. And yeah, I mean, I haven't seen the debate with Inspiring Philosophy versus Matt Dillahunty.
It was a pretty poor show.
I can imagine it was. I can imagine Inspiring Philosophy put on a really good show, and Matt Dillahunty was the proverbial pigeon playing chess. Now, as you know, I'm an atheist, so I should, in terms of this battle, be on Matt's side. But that's not how I operate, and I'm fairly certain that's not how you operate either.
No.
Matt walked off thinking he won, and Inspiring Philosophy went, what a cock. Hot take. This is from LB. When people say the internet is where religion comes to die, false. If anything, the internet breeds a lot of misinformation on subjects, on all sorts of subjects. I think the internet, when it wasn't massively used, was a great place to find information on sort of general genuine conspiracies, because it was like the only way you could find out this information that was locked away in some deep dark cave. And the second it became publicly available to everyone has an internet connection, even just by having a phone, it became the place where everyone spreads misinformation. Oh, look, it's on a meme. It's got to be true. Saw it on Facebook. Yeah.
Remember all the atheists who used to say the internet is where religion goes to die? Well, that's morphed now into the internet is where intelligence goes to die.
I think it does. Because of tribalism. I think when it was more of a niche thing, there wasn't as much of a tribe on the internet. And now, even when I experienced starting to debate atheism and theism online, when I first started doing it, I was corrected by all the atheists out there. No, atheism is only a lack of belief. And at that time, I went, well, everybody who describes himself as an atheist is saying this, so maybe they're right. Okay, I'll change my mind. And I started arguing the same way as them until I started thinking about things a little bit more. Yeah. I've been that dogmatic keyboard warrior lacktheist myself, and I'm embarrassed by it, but I keep admitting to it to let you other dogmatic lacktheists out there know that it's fine to say, I fucked up, I've been wrong, I've been illogical, shit, I'm going to change my ways. And I'm still not there, I would love to be a completely virtuous person. I'm not, I'm still a bit of a cunt.
Yeah, same. I mean, a lot of them will say something like, it's okay to be wrong, and it's okay to admit you're wrong, and it's better to admit you're wrong and learn something new, but none of them ever actually seem to follow that philosophy.
In general.
In general, yeah.
I'll caveat that, because there are some that do.
Yeah.
I mean, some of the people we've had conversations with, and we've managed to change a few minds of, whether they're theists or lack theists or whatever, we have managed to change minds. We've changed each other's minds, and all sorts. But yes, so
before we go on, just one plug for another YouTube channel. I probably shouldn't do this, but I'm quite bad for advertising other people's channels.
No, do it. I think that's a good thing. We're not just saying everybody watch us. Look, there's other great shit out there to watch too.
Well, this is to do with the Matt Dillahunty and inspiring philosophy debate. There's a channel called Perspective Philosophy, and he's a PhD student, and he did a breakdown of the Matt Dillahunty inspiring philosophy debate, and it's really good.
Cool. I'll have to check that one out as well. I probably will need you to remind me because I won't
Yeah,
remember by
no
the time
worries.
we're done.
Well, he's a Geordie as well, so I don't know how many Americans will actually be able to understand him.
I probably won't either. Oh, why, man.
Why, aye, man. What you do is philosophy, like.
I mean, do you remember Geordie Racer when you were younger?
No.
It was terrible educational show about some bloke called Geordie Racer who was a Geordie. And that's all I remember. And the theme tune to it. And that's all I really shit.
No. The only Geordie thing like that I remember is the thing that had Ant and Dec in it, and I can't remember the name of it now.
Where they were PJ and Duncan Lake.
Yeah.
And they shot him in the eyes. Biker Grove. No, it wasn't Biker Grove.
Biker Grove.
Was it
yeah,
Biker
that's
Grove?
the one. Yeah.
Yeah.
Grange Hill for Northerners.
Grange Hill, that was the other one. Yeah, Grange Hill and Biker Grove. Yeah, classic. Though typically the people watching us right now are all American going, what the fuck are these cunts
What
on
are you
about?
talking about, you bastards?
So Leon says, I find the definition of agnosticism that says I don't know to be pretty useless. I don't think anybody knows. That's why belief is relevant here. Yeah, I mean, so one thing I will say on that, I don't know isn't always talking about knowledge. Okay? So when you say I don't know, that can mean I'm uncertain. So think about this. Where did you leave your car keys? I don't know. You know, where do you believe you left your car keys? Well, I don't know. You're talking about uncertainty rather than knowledge in that particular sort of thing. I'm unsure. I can't remember. That's what it's discussing there. So it is a way of describing a suspense of judgment. The problem is, because people say, well, I don't know, in relation to that, people conflate that with a knowledge sort of thing, the gnosis part of agnostic. And I don't have knowledge. Well, actually, when most people are saying I don't know, they're not going, I don't have knowledge. I mean,
Sure.
Do you believe gods exist? I don't have knowledge. So I get what you're saying, that I don't know gets us nowhere. But you've got to think about how it should be meant and versus how people are doing it. And that's why the agnostic atheism thing is a bit confusing. I don't hold knowledge beliefs. I don't have knowledge about whether gods exist or not, but I don't believe they exist. Well, what the fuck does knowledge have to do with it?
Yeah.
I'm speaking of your doxastic state, at the end of the day. Speaking of agnostic atheism, I have an article launching tomorrow, I think around midday, 12th of February, about agnostic atheism. One of the problems with it is the term has utility because generally agnostic atheists think they're all using it the same way. But a friend posted about it after I got into a debate with him, going, what does agnostic atheism mean to you? And I shit you not, nearly every single person defined agnostic atheism a different way. So I thought, perfect, I'm going to do an article on this. So that goes tomorrow. Might even be something that we cover off in a couple of weeks, or next week or whatever. In fact, it'll probably fit into our series that we're going to be doing on Why Are We Atheists?
Yeah. Do the article reading on the Thursday after the first part of Why Are We Atheists?
Yeah. But obviously next Thursday is our chat with Opie about naturalism.
And I can't wait for that.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, Opie's going to be teaching us. I'm actually going to have to shut up So, Dave, you're going to have to constantly tell me to shut up and let Opie speak, because I'm not very good at being someone who shuts up.
Okay. Every time you talk, I'll lift my top up, and then nobody will speak for hours.
LB says, remember a couple of weeks ago, him, Dave, Joe, Steve, Layman, all in a long thread that went forever about the definition of atheist. Yeah.
Was that the Randolph Richardson one?
I'm not sure. If it was, Randolph was, oh my God. I mean, Randolph's site is another one that I'm going to have to bring up into our atheism conversation.
I think we should do it next Wednesday.
Yeah? What,
just like an impromptu stream of let's make fun of him.
Okay, I'm not adverse to that. I should be better, but I'm not.
We're normally better people than that, but no, it's Randolph.
Yeah,
he kind of deserves it after his behavior a couple of weeks ago.
You know, don't atheists say ridiculous beliefs deserve ridicule? So if that's the case, he is deserving of ridicule. Now, I don't necessarily believe people deserve to be ridiculed, but yeah.
Yeah, he had a very holier than thou attitude for somebody who doesn't believe in things like being holy.
Yeah, definitely. Opie had a phone call. You only just joined in. It's okay, Opie. We've been having a blast. We're just talking about how we're going to have you on next Thursday as well to teach us about naturalism.
I've dug out a couple of my philosophy of science books, so.
Yeah, brilliant. I'm going to love this one because I have a very basic understanding of naturalism. You know, I've looked into it a very, very tiny bit, and there is a lot I don't know. So all my questions are going to be very genuine. So a lot of the time when we discuss a topic, I'll ask a question because I know that there's a piece of knowledge that we need to elicit to explain it, and we go a bit of back and forth. But it's going to be even more interesting for me because I'm going to be completely bewildered, and you'll notice probably me go completely quiet going, oh, fuck, I need to process this. But I've got to ask the next question. Shit. And you'll see my mind actively melt on screen.
Like mine does every week. That's why my hairline's receding.
LB, sorry, says, yeah, it was with Duke and Randolph. Yeah. There's a good reason I've got them blocked.
My brain is still in a sling after that discussion.
Yeah, we will definitely be bringing that up. So as I mentioned, next, in fact, before I get to that point, if any of you have any further questions or comments that you want read out, get them in now because we're coming to the end. But next Tuesday is my birthday, and we're going to basically have an open stream. So anyone that wants to come on and join us can in our Discord, and it will just be there. The idea is I'm going to get drunk and chat to you. That's all that's going on. That's right. It isn't. You can do an Ask Me Anything. We might play some drinking games. We might not. I don't know. There is no plan. It's just to have a hangout because I haven't really hung out with anyone in about a year. And generally, but once in a while, I do like a little bit of human interaction. So hopefully you guys can join us next week. And
we'd just like to get to know you better, basically.
Yeah, definitely. Having a real conversation with you guys would be absolutely awesome. And you know what? As I've said before, I'm happy to. If any of you have a topic you'd like to discuss in a bit more detail, I'd be really interested to know. If you want to tell us a story about how you became an atheist or why you're a deist or anything like that, great. If you've got a topic that you're passionate about, like philosophy of science or anything like that, brilliant. Bring it on. If you've got anything like that, please let us know. We love this shit.
Or if you want to just come on and tell me how smart I am, I'm up for that too.
I do that every week, Dave.
Yeah, but you're just being nice.
I don't know how to be nice. But yeah, and Wednesday, when we get a chance, so next week I've got Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday off, so we're going to do our normal streaming time on Tuesday, but we're going to try and get a Wednesday one in on the day, but we don't know specifically what time it's going to be. We're going to book Tuesday and Wednesday in right after this stream and send out an invite. I'm going to send out 10 invites with the stream for Tuesday's one. But if you miss that link and they've already been used, and you want to join us, just contact me either at Answers in Reason or get me on Facebook or anything like that. We'd love to have you there. Again, it's not going to be a serious discussion on Tuesday. It's just going to be having a drink more than anything. Maybe we play a game like Dead Presidents or something like that. Fuck knows. But yes, so a couple more comments have come in. LB says, the only time I block someone is when they block me. I wait for them to block me and then I return the favour. Yeah, I must admit, I tend not to block people. If they bother me enough, I'll mute them. With Duke, it was a case of I'd had enough of him constantly jumping on every post that I made and like trying to derail it with his weak logic. And it was like, I don't need you. I don't need to get involved in these conversations. Even though I muted him, I'd suddenly see this thread and obviously you can view the things you've muted. So I blocked him in the hope that it would mean he couldn't respond to it. But the way Twitter actually works is if I make a post and someone else responds, he can respond to that person. And then he doesn't even have the context of the original post. He's bad enough with the fucking context, and now without context, he makes even more stupid statements. Randolph actually, he blocked me. So the princess of the Canadian Atheist Club and the dictator of the American Atheists have both blocked me because I demonstrated how their logic was fallacious. I call that a win. To go hand in hand with that, Ken Ham has also blocked me for doing the same thing.
I've been blocked by nobody. I feel kind of left out.
Yeah, and the funniest thing was like when Aaron Ra blocked me, he blocked me because someone sent a link to the stream that we were on with Chesh.
Yeah.
But
he didn't block me.
But he didn't block you. But I mean, maybe because we are Answers in Reason, he didn't realise you also had your account that you posted on underneath.
Possibly.
So, yeah. Can you go over the point you made about knowledge and agnosticism again? I was a little confused. Okay. So, when someone says, I don't know, they're not necessarily talking about knowledge. They are sometimes talking about certainty instead, like a psychological certainty, where you're unsure. You know, if you think about the situation, as I mentioned, where did you leave your keys? If you say, I don't know, you're not necessarily saying, I don't have the knowledge. You're saying, I'm not sure. So in that instance, you're sort of thinking in the same way as the psychological state of being agnostic. You're not sure where you left them. You're suspending judgment. You know, think about it this way. Did you leave your keys on the table? I don't know. Did you leave your keys on the table? I'm not sure. It's the same sort of statement, you know. You don't necessarily think you did, but you don't necessarily think you didn't. I'm not sure. I'm suspending judgment. I don't know. So when someone says, I don't know, you're not necessarily talking about knowledge. It's the same thing when people bring up things like information. Some people conflate knowledge and information. You know, knowledge is things that you know. Okay. Well, the square root of 196 is 14, right? I've given you that information, but is it really knowledge if you don't understand how square roots work, right? There's a difference between information and actual knowledge.
Yeah, another way to simplify it is this. Imagine when your partner says, "What you fancy for dinner?" and you go, I don't know. What is there? I don't know. You're not saying that you're without knowledge of what's for dinner. You're just saying, well, I haven't really thought about it, or I haven't really come to a conclusion, or it's not about making any kind of knowledge claim. I think one of the reasons that it can be kind of confusing is because of the Huxleyan epistemic principle of we shouldn't say we know something without sufficient evidence. So it can be kind of seen as a knowledge claim, and the two kind of get confused. But usually when you're saying you're agnostic on something, you're saying, well, I don't know what I want for dinner. Yeah. Similar kind of thing.
Definitely. I think that's one of the things that people don't necessarily know about agnostic as well. It's not necessarily just talking about the God claim. Now, there is hard agnosticism that is specifically talking about how we can't have knowledge of gods. But in general, when you're speaking of what is sometimes referred to as weak agnosticism, or the psychological state of being agnostic, it just means that you're suspending judgment in regards to the proposition. So if you remember the article that I just read, right at the bottom, you had your 3 belief states, where belief, disbelief, and suspensive judgment. Saying I don't know is basically that suspensive judgment.
Yeah.
Hopefully that made sense to you, though, Leon. If it didn't, I will try and think of another way to describe it, but hopefully it did. Yeah. Are there any more questions or anything like that? Oh, and LB says you can't wait for my birthday. I can. It means I'm another fucking year older and I'm losing more hair. I mean, look at this shit. Like, it's all the way up to here now. Like, I'm catching up with you, Dave.
Never.
At least this keeps on growing.
Yeah. Believe it or not, I used to have hair like almost down to my ass when I was in my metal days.
Really?
Yeah, now I can't even grow up past my hairline.
It reminds me of my mate Alex. Actually, he known him for years, and the last place I worked, I actually got him a job there. And you know, every 2 weeks he'd go, "I really need a haircut." I'd be like, "How do you know?" Because honestly, it never looked any different, but he'd always complain about it. But anyway, cool. So I think that's us done for this week. So next Tuesday and Thursday are definitely happening, and probably Wednesday too. Wednesday might be a little bit lower tone than we usually pride ourselves on, but it's kind of deserved.
It's cathartic for us.
Yes, it needs to be done. Cool. Well, I mean, I kind of don't want to finish because it's our only one this week. It's been quite enjoyable, and I love doing these streams. I wish we could do them more often, really. But I suppose it's good to end whilst it's still going well, isn't it?
Yeah.
So, outro music. Oh, look at that. So you've been listening to the Fresh Air Sci-Fi Show. We've been discussing You Won't Believe This, which is an article that I did in relation to beliefs and propositional logic. As I mentioned, next Tuesday is my birthday, so we're just having a general chat, and next Thursday we've got OP on the stream teaching us about naturalism and the differences between methodological naturalism and ontological naturalism. I said both those words okay.
Nice one.
And next week we might be going over the Canadian Atheist Club's official definition of atheism as well. The following week we're going to start a series on why the hell Dave and I are atheists. You've been listening to the Fresh Air Sci-Fi Show. I'm Joe.
And I'm Dave. Or not B with P equals I'm Joe.
As I mentioned, Tuesdays and Thursdays, 8 p.m. GMT, 3 p.m. Eastern, 2 p.m. Central, whatever it is anywhere else around the world, is when we usually stream. Thank you everyone who has listened in, and we will catch you on the flip side.
Good night, guys. Take it easy.